Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Our guest today is Niza Gonzalez from the Web of Trust. Niza, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Vance. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be, presented in this podcast, learn a bit more about what you're currently doing as well, and just having this conversation. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. And we want to learn about what you have going on. Tell us a little bit about how this project came to be and a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So, I'm currently head of data for the Web of Trust map, which is an initiative from the Key State Capital. Just to give a little feedback or more of context, Key State Capital is a syndicate of angel investors, and they mostly focus on investing on digital identity. And so they wanted to build this map, which basically gives you an overview of what the current ecosystem of decentralized identity looks like. And I can go a bit more in depth with what decentralized identity is in a bit. But the idea was that we can see who is involved in the ecosystem, what projects currently exist that use this technology, what companies or what governments are already adopting the technology or are, showing interest. Also seeing who is working in these initiatives. It's also important for us to kind of like provide this kind of like database or this visualization of who's working on what, so that the community can keep growing, can keep connecting, and just in general, you get an overview of what the current ecosystem looks like. So we started it off, I think it was in 2023. So we've been working on it for more than 2 years, and we've just recently launched it in March during our launch event in Zurich. So it's been quite a few years already in this research process, and we're just very excited that we can finally put it out in the world and can provide a research for this industry, which is a bit young, but I think it's developing quite fast. So that's
Cool.
what basically we've been going through.
And are you based in Zurich?
No, I am based in Honduras, but traveled for that specific event to be able to present. But I'm full time in Honduras in the capital.
Okay, nice. Yeah, we've had on, for example, Joyce Brand from Pioneering
Oh
Prosperity,
yeah.
who wrote a book about Honduras and Ciudad Morazan and everything. We've had on the Ciudad Morazan guys, like Alex Ugorji, who you've probably heard of.
Mhm.
So cool. I mean, we're all about second passports and getting multiple travel documents and having multiple pieces of identity so that you're not dependent on any one government for your travel documents and your identity documents. So maybe Nisa, you could kind of explain what is digital identity.
Yeah. So I think digital identity in general, we can think of it as, the characteristics and attributes that you hold that puts you aside from everyone else in the web. So
Mm,
digital identity can be um, things from your username on Instagram, could be your email, could be, let's say, your LinkedIn as well. So anything that you put out on the internet that is kind of like setting you aside from anyone. So if I Google myself, what I will find basically would be my LinkedIn, for example. That's a piece of identity that I have on the internet. And so I think that at this point, most of us would have a digital identity somewhere, including, like I said, even if it's just an email, that's still a piece of identity that you hold on the internet. So you can think of digital
sure.
identity in that terms.
Okay. And I guess what's the evolution of digital identity? So you have centralized, federated, decentralized. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. So we start off with when you start with digital identity, you also have to think that, for example, we are currently in a state where we are in a centralized system in which when you have your email, that email is stored on a database. For example, if I have my Google Gmail, then Google has access to all of the Gmails that have been created ever in the world. So they have, their database. Um, Facebook, for example, they also have a full database of all the profiles that have been created, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Right?
Hmm.
Um, Even with governments as well, they have their databases of who are the citizens, the IDs, the passports, etc. Now the thing is that with centralized systems, you do not own that piece of identity. Rather, they are the ones who hold power over it. So at any point,
Right.
if, for example, Google decides that they no longer want my Gmail to exist, they can just revoke that and I'm left without a Gmail, right? So I'm not the
Right.
owner of that email,
Right.
even
Getting
though it,
canceled.
yeah, exactly. Even Twitter, if I get banned, then that Twitter account is no longer mine, right? It can be revoked. So we're currently in a system where everything is centralized. We basically don't have control over the digital identity, right? We can use it, but at any point it can just be taken away from us. And so you can also think of it as centralized, where whenever you're logging in or signing up, for example, in different websites or different services, you have to create a username and a password. And you have to do that for multiple websites. And at some point, that kind of becomes annoying that I have to create a username and a password. And if you care a little bit about security, you'll create a different password for each one of them. But in most cases, you'll try to use the same password with a bit of a variation, right? Um, and so from that, from thinking about, okay, yes, we do have a central database still, but the idea was that you can kind of like enhance the experience that the user is having. And so that's when we move from centralized databases to a federated system. So the federated system, you can think of it. Have you ever seen when you're logging in or signing up for a new website, they tell you like, hey, sign in with Google, sign in with Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
The single sign on.
yeah, exactly. And so that's where we shift into a federated one, where instead of creating a username and a password for each one of the websites, now you can use your Google, for example, and connect it to, another website or another service. And still, the problem with this is that you still don't have control over this digital identity, right? Rather, Google still has control over it, and it tracks where you're logging in, where you're using the services, every time you sign in, every time you don't.
Hmm.
So even though we're progressing in the sense of, okay, yeah, you're making my user experience kind of more easy, where I can just log in using the same credential, it is still not as private, and it's still not yours. It is still not as safe. If anyone just hacks
Right.
my Google, which I truly hope it never happens, um, they'll have access to all of the services that I've been logging into, right?
Right.
So it's still kind of like a honeypot, of privacy. And so now these are the ones that we're currently living through, where again we have a centralized database. There's still websites where you have to create a username and a website, a
Hmm.
username and a password. And there's still governments who have the centralized database of all your identities, passwords, visas, etc. And though we've improved in the sense of, yeah, now we have a federated system where, can make our lives a little bit easier, it's still not the safest option. So right now, what we're currently seeing is this shift of power, basically, on digital identity, where we're focusing now on decentralized identity. So the idea is that decentralized identity can give you ownership of your identity.
Hmm.
So instead of having a centralized database where all of these identities are stored, the idea is that the user can have their digital passport, let's say, stored on their mobile devices.
Hmm.
And there's ways in which you can store it. You can store it, locally, where it's locally on your phone, or you can use a wallet, and the wallet would be similar to a Google Wallet or an Apple Wallet, where you can store credentials and stuff. But it's a bit more safe, considering the technology behind it. But
Okay.
the idea behind decentralized identity is that you actually have ownership over this credential.
Mm. Okay. So, and this would be like a blockchain thing, or how would it work?
Yeah, yeah. So it would rely on distributed ledger technology and a verifiable trust registry. So basically, the way it would work is that there's cryptographic help to ensure that the identity that you have or the certificates that you have um, can be stored in a tamper resistant way and that you only have access to it. But yeah, uh, blockchain is one of the technologies that helps out make sure that this certificates and identity aren't being manipulated with, right?
Because I
Um,
guess we already have digital identity systems, but the ones that aren't blockchain based that they maybe have currently, like the old school ones on COBOL, or famously like the US Social Security system right now, where we're paying people that are over 120 years old. So there's a couple problems, right? With there's data breaches, there's identity fraud, there's impersonation. Um, so we already have these systems, and the idea is to make it better with blockchain and cryptography and maybe some other solutions.
yeah, so there is already improvement. I mean, there's already, if you think about it, you can have diplomas, for example, from universities that use blockchain to secure them better. But the whole idea of decentralized identity is that even if you're using blockchain, even if the diploma is being issued and it's stored in the blockchain, the universities would still have access to it and would still have, kind of like the repository of who are they issuing to and being able to revoke it, etc. It kind of helps make it tamper proof. But with decentralized identity, you can think of it as such. Like if I were applying for a job, for example, and a university would issue a diploma, and yes, it would be backed up by whether that is blockchain or other technologies that are tamper resistant. But for example, a university would issue me a diploma. um, they can do this digitally, and it will be seen as a verifiable credential. And the thing is, this diploma will be stored in my wallet. Once it's stored in my wallet, it is mine. And um, the university itself wouldn't have like this repository of all of the diplomas that they've issued. Of course, they can keep track of, hey, yeah, we've issued this, but it would not be their diploma anymore. It will be mine, and I'll keep it on my phone.
Mm.
And so the technology itself is kind of like having a whole process. So the university would issue me this digital diploma. I'll save it on my wallet. And for example, if I'm applying for a job and the employer wants proof of my degree, um, they can send kind of like a request of proof of my degree. And yeah, the whole technical part of it does involve a lot of cryptographic technology. And so the employer requests proof of my degree. And instead of me sending this a PDF or this diploma picture with a QR code that it's cryptographically backed, um, basically I'll share my digital credential, but it would not include like all of my details. I wouldn't have to send a PDF. They would send a request, and in my wallet I'll have like a request that says, "Hey, do you want to share your digital diploma with this employer?" I could click yes or no. Um, what they would get would not be a picture of my diploma. What they would get would just be a yes, this person did study at this university and did graduate in international relations, for example. And so the idea as well with this technology is that you're more private of how you're sharing your digital credentials. So even if we have solutions that are backed with blockchain, the idea with decentralized identity as well is that you have a privacy feature in which you don't have to share everything about your credentials or your identity. Rather, you can share the necessary info uh, to confirm
Mm.
the request that you're getting. And so once that employer gets that confirmation, like, yes, Nisa did graduate of international relations from this university,
Mm.
um, it'll be done. There wouldn't be a need for the employer to call the university or email the university like, hey, I'm just verifying that, this diploma is correct. Or they shouldn't go through a due diligence process to check that, in fact, I was in that university. Rather, it would be this process that would be working instantly. I mean, it wouldn't take days to confirm that I did go into that university. Rather, it will take a few
Right.
minutes. Yeah, and so Yes, there are solutions that include blockchain already, but the idea is that this verification process can be done quickly through this technology.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So, what is the current adoption of decentralized identity? Are there any examples of government adoption or industry use cases? This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by job stacking. If you're a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Haltza, author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income by implementing his paycheck multiplication layering method. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond 20K a month. With this method, Rolf contractually guarantees that you'll be able to double your income in 45 days. So, if you're interested in unleashing your earning potential and doubling your income, then click the link in the description and book a call with Rolf right now.
Yeah, well, actually, so there's more than I actually thought there was gonna be. When I started this research project, I was not very familiar with the whole concept of decentralized identity, so there was a
Mm,
big training process. And from what I understood at the beginning of the research was like, let's see how much development we've had in the industry, or how who is working on this anyway. I was a bit skeptical about who was working on it, and how is it being developed,
mhm,
mostly because I was not familiar with the industry. But you'll be surprised that there's a lot of people involved in it, and industries, sorry, and companies also involved. Currently, we see around 270 projects that are currently working actively on developing decentralized identity initiatives, whether that
mhm,
is providing a software for issuers, for people who want to be issuing, diplomas, who want to be issuing medical records, who want to
mhm.
be issuing even passports as well,
Makes sense.
or residential cards.
Like,
Um,
what about like Udemy or Coursera, one of those platforms? I feel like that'd be an
Coursera,
easy.
I don't think I've seen them in the research using decentralized identity. Actually, I don't think they're there yet. But I definitely think that when they adopt it, it's gonna be great, because I know that there's like the big course companies.
Right.
But at the moment, they have not adopted it yet. Um, but there's already, when it comes to educational certificates, there's already, actually, education is one of the industries that has been adopting the most.
Mm,
Not necessarily Coursera or Udemy, but they already have a lot of softwares that are focusing on this educations, and there's a lot of universities who are already kind of like testing them. And but yeah, so there is already adoption. And so, for example, one of the things that I found most interesting is, or that I found exciting, I suppose, was seeing big companies like MasterCard or Visa or Microsoft already using this technology, and partnering with these companies who are developing it.
mm,
Um, even Microsoft already has like their own product, called Microsoft Entra Verified ID, that uses decentralized ID. So you can see already these big
mm,
companies already exploring the possibility of using decentralized identity. And so, like I said, you have companies that are focusing on these issuers. You have companies that are also focusing on the holder, which is you, focusing on you having your wallet, and having different features for your wallet. There are certain wallets that, besides providing, a place where you can keep your credentials, they also provide you with messaging, so that you can message safely, that you can ensure that the person that you're texting is the person that you're texting. And so you have this company is working for you to make sure that they can provide products for you as a holder. And then there's also companies providing software for the verifiers, which would be the people who are making sure that these credentials are working, and that they're correct, and that they're truthful. So you do have companies that are already working on these technologies, and they're already advancing. And
mhm.
there's already initiatives at a government level that are happening. So, for example, you have in Singapore you have SGID, which is basically your digital ID to connect to other government services, and it's decentralized. So it wouldn't be like an ID card or an ID number which the government owns, and at any moment if you are no longer welcome in Singapore, they'll remove it from you. Rather, it's yours to keep. And so this SGID will basically serve you as your digital passport to do do work or to connect to different government services. And this SGID would be kept in your wallet. So you already have governments already implementing it, and making sure that you are the owner of that identity. The And like I mentioned, it's something very interesting because when I started this research, I was not very familiar with who was adopting or how it was developing. And now that we finished, you actually realize like they might not have like the most wow big amazing adoption, but there are important institutions that are already looking into it and taking it as an opportunity
Yeah.
for certain projects or piloting. um, and a big example of them as well is Europe. Europe right now has it's like the biggest region that is developing self-sovereign identity or decentralized identity initiatives.
Hmm.
And even
Hopefully
in a
decentralized.
right.
Hopefully decentralized in Europe.
Yes.
They like to control things over there.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing that they're currently doing. They're already doing legislation for it, and providing all of the all of the requirements, etc. The
Hmm.
idea of it is that you can experiment with it a lot, but European Union is already working on it and regulating it as well. They have this regulation called EIDAS, and the 2.0 is currently focusing on hosting this technology. But um, they're already doing large scale pilots in which they're having at least all of the countries in the European Union already start developing initiatives in their country to adopt this. First of all, to start using digital identity, but also
Hmm.
testing the centralized identity and making sure that they can incorporate it as well into their developments. So there is a lot of adoption at the level of the government, and I think in general everyone just knows that you know you have to make identity more secure. In the
Yeah.
example of, and I can give you a quick example, but if you
Sure.
think about India's digital ID system, Aadhaar, I think it's mentioned like that, Aadhaar, they had a major breach of information where the IDs of all the citizens, their addresses, and their information was leaked. And so
Wow.
it's a big problem at the end of the day because all of the citizens' information is out there now. And you could think, okay, well, for me particularly, I wasn't so I wasn't so interested or so familiar with how important privacy was until I was getting into this project and studying a bit more about what the problem is. And I had a similar case in Honduras where our information was out there on the web. In 2021, we had a new ID system rolling out,
Hmm.
and what you can do in that system basically was look up someone's ID, and you'll get the information of that person. And this
Wow.
it was basically just a website where you put anyone's ID and you'll get their information.
Wow.
And then when they figure it out, like, hey, we should actually make this safer for people. Like, you shouldn't be seeing all of the details of anyone. It was already too late. That information was already downloadable in another website. Like, hey, if you want to know the citizens' information, here you go. You have a PDF with all of the.
I feel like this happened in a lot of countries.
It does. It does happen where there's a lot of leakage. So I think it's worth that. It's to applaud that the European Union at least is looking into safer ways to keep their citizens' information a bit safer. Because I definitely do that for my country. They don't. It's not something they think about often, and I I don't think I want my address to be on a website, right? I don't want it to be out there. So at least you know that there's a few governments that are already focusing on
That's why
preventing
we
it.
say, by the way, for the audience, that the address that you give to governments shouldn't be where you actually live.
You
You
can
should
have these
use
instances. Hmm.
you like we have a couple services. We have one in at this moment we have a Paraguay service and we have a US service where we can get you a residential address in Paraguay or in the US. It can have mailing as well. You know, they can pick up your mail for you, scan it to you, send it to you. And that way the address that you're interfacing with governments with isn't your real address, so they don't know where to like show up with the guns to you know throw you in jail or accidentally slash on purpose leak your address. um, but that's just a little side note. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Crema Social. Crema Social is like TikTok for international dating. It's an app you can download right now on your phone, and 3 out of 4 people on Crema are single women. The app was founded in Colombia, so unsurprisingly, there are a lot of Latinas on the app, by the way. So, how does it work? Crema Social is a social meal experience where you invite a hot girl for a lunch date via video call and food delivery. New concept, so you'll have to try it out for yourself, but this is probably the best way to meet Latinas before you visit the country. So if you're in Latin America or planning to visit Latin America, download Crema Social now and start getting dates right away. There will be a link in the description to download, or just search Crema Social on your favorite app store. Have fun, guys.
That's very interesting, to be honest. Yeah, it's exactly the reason why you shouldn't have this centralized database just leaking everyone's information. And I think in general, there's a lot of people who can benefit from having this decentralized identity. I mean,
Yeah.
um, and I also think about it as it's just so much efficient. Like there's so much efficiency out of it. And for example, what I think about and the thing that resonated me with me the most when I was thinking about this technology was thinking when it comes to, for example, healthcare. Um, you ask me today, hey, do you have a medical record of everything you've had
Yeah.
happen with you? I don't. It's basically on drawers in each one of the hospitals or clinics I've visited. And that's kind of annoying because if I want to get my records, I'll have to go individually to each one of those hospital or clinics to get that
Uh,
information. So with decentralized identity, if I were to go to this clinic and let's say that I went and I don't know, I got some exams to check my blood, what I would get is a verifiable credential or a medical record that would say, hey, yeah, this is your blood results and it'll be mine. It'll be stored in my wallet. Now I have it in my control. I wouldn't have to, like, for example, if right now the clinic could give me a paper and tell me, hey, here you go. Here's the blood results, or they can send me an email. But at any point, what if I lose access to my email? What if I lose the paper? I no longer have it. I'll have to go to the hospital again. But with this technology, what I would have is I would have it in my wallet, saved, stored, and that will be a verifiable credential. So anyone tells me
so
tomorrow,
you'd have your decentralized personal identity records somehow linked to your hopefully decentralized medical records. Medical records is like a whole other topic. It's a very complicated thing. I I actually wanted to go a bit of a different direction, or just kind of to go a bit high level about the web of
yeah,
trust and just talk about that a bit. So it mentions on the web of trust, you did it kind of worldwide, 3,500 private entities, 1,000 public entities, 39 regulations, 83 standards, 39 consortia, 268 ID projects, 110 DLT tech. What's DLT?
distributed ledger technology. So that can include
I
blockchain
should
as
know
well.
that. DLT tech, blockchain, 140 blockchains, 134 DID methods. What's DID?
Uh,
Decentralized
DID is
ID
decentralized identifiers. So that will be
identifier.
the actually identifier for you.
So, how did you decide what to include and what to not include on your web of trust?
Yeah, so we started off um, getting like a whole overview of what digital identity initiatives were going on in the world. And when I say digital identity, I mean centralized, federated, or decentralized. So it's broad. It's very broad concept. So we wanted to know what initiatives are going on around the world with digital identity. We studied over 1,000 initiatives that are providing already um, verification or authentication in the web.
Hmm.
And so from those 1,000, we were focusing again mostly on decentralized identity on this specific technology. And as we were filtering it out, we also wanted to focus our efforts on government affiliated projects. So this would mean that all of the projects that we have in the map in the research have some sort of um, endorsement, shout out, funding, or partnership with the government. The reason why we chose that this projects had an affiliation with the government is because that means that their adoption is a bit more it's a bit more advanced, right? And so even though right now we have 270 plus projects in the map, there's already more initiatives out there. Perhaps they don't have a government affiliation, which means they're a bit more young projects, or there's actually projects that actually do not want to get involved with the government at all, so they also just do their thing. But for this one specifically, we just wanted to focus on those that we considered were having a bit more adoption. Um, and so once we had this, we defined like, okay, we have over 270 projects that we want to research. What do we want to know about them? And what our interest was is understand who is partnering with them, who is actually interested in these projects, who is using them. And so we collected information, and that's where we come with the public entities and the private entities. Um, for example, you'll have a project that is partnering with Microsoft, that is partnering with the government of British Columbia in Canada, that is partnering with Visa. So we wanted to understand who actually is paying attention and putting in efforts as well to partner with them to truly see what the ecosystem looked like. We decided as well that we wanted to know who is working on it, so that's why we also have information on who's working on what project. And we also have this in the map that we, again, this whole industry is about privacy. So if anyone tells us like, hey, actually I do not want to be in this website, I don't want to be affiliated to any of these projects, and I don't want to be here, then we definitely do have that option. Like if anyone is not happy with being in the map because their name's out there and they're more private about it, then we can just, but we also wanted to look into the technology. Most importantly, there's an issue in the or I guess it's a work in progress in the industry where they're looking into interoperability. So what this means basically is that there's a lot of efforts in you know using the decentralized identity technology. But as you are using decentralized identity technology, you have to make sure that everyone is using it in a way that's compatible, in a way that if I want to present my digital credential, my verifiable credential, I need to make sure that the technology that is being used by the verifier is compatible with my verifiable credential. And I heard an example recently that it kind of like helps understand this. So you know that when there's pictures, you have PNG and JPEG, right? Those are two different formats of photographs, right? Of digital pictures. And it doesn't matter whether it's one or the other, your computer still accepts them and still is able to visualize it, right? Um, so this is kind of like the same case with decentralized identity. Right now, there's different standards or different formats that these credentials have. And so the idea is that in the future, your wallet can accept either of the formats. Um, but there's this case in which if a wallet just supports one certain standard or format, they won't be able to visualize the other format. So it's currently a work in progress in that side, making sure that the wallets and the standards and formats of the credentials are compatible. And so that's what we also wanted to track. We wanted to see how compatible and how interoperable the industry is, and that's where we collected also technological information and also information about what blockchains are being used as well. in this map, what we have discovered is that Ethereum is the blockchain that is being used the most,
Mm-hmm.
um, from these projects. Um, yeah, it's Ethereum. And so basically that we just wanted to truly understand, one, how the industry was connected, how
Mm-hmm.
these public companies, public entities or private companies are are working on the project. So for example, you will see that the government of British Columbia actually is working on 14 projects, and
Wow.
you can see
What?
that.
That's a
Yeah,
lot.
that is quite a lot. That's like, I think the maximum amount of connections we've had is like 40,
Mm.
um, where an entity is like involved in 40 companies. But the government of British Columbia is actually very involved with decentralized identity, and they already provide a wallet for a holder. You as a British Columbia citizen can have your BC wallet and keep your credentials there, and they also have a registry of companies. So you'll have, for example, if you're interested in knowing about XYZ company, you look them up in this website, and you'll get confirmed data from them, like this is, their year
Mm.
when they started, etc. um, but yeah, that's the interesting part of things. Like, governments that you wouldn't think are as involved as they are, turns out that they are, or companies as well. So it's that we wanted to see exactly who was most involved in these projects. We also wanted to see what people were working on, and interesting enough,
Sure.
these people are working a bit of on everything. It's very interesting to see like one single person working on 10 different projects. It's crazy
Mm.
the amount of effort these people put into it. And then that interoperability side of things, that we wanted to see what standards are being used the most, and where the industry is like focusing their efforts on the standards. um, and so yeah, basically it's why we chose what we chose. And then from the side of consortia, which is foundations or associations who are, you know, having discussions, having working groups, or developing technologies um, around decentralized identity. Those were mostly handpicked. It was mostly about kind of like the big players of this consortium who are providing, the space to talk more about it. But yeah, it was mostly out of the necessity of truly understanding where the industry stands and who is actively collaborating.
Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. BitRefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. That's cool. And what are some of your top projects that you think are funny or interesting or worth mentioning? What are some interesting projects?
I found one of the ones, well, top of mind, I always think about one, which is Domi. Domi is in real estate.
Mm.
So
Okay.
when it comes to real estate, and let's say I want to rent an apartment, they'll ask me for like, make sure that I have a salary. Like, for example, I have a salary over $2,000, that I have a credit score that is positive,
Yeah.
that I don't know, I went to university or something like that. Like, they want to know things about me, right? And
Yeah.
and sure, I mean, you want to know who lives in your house, fine. But the thing with Domi is that for the tenant using verifiable credentials, I don't have to, provide all of this documentation, physical documentation, or emails or something like that. Rather, the property manager would send a request to me like, "Hey, I literally just want to know if you earn over 2,000, if your credit score is good, and if you're planning to stay, I don't know, over 3 years, or if you have a resident permit." That's all they need to know. They don't need to know if I win, if my salary is 250. They don't have to know that. So
Right.
what the property manager would get is a yes, this person qualifies. If you want to have an interview, go ahead, but this person qualifies. And they don't really need to know the numbers exactly, or they don't need to know my current address. I mean, they don't have to know anything other than yes, this person qualifies.
That makes sense.
And so yeah, and so it's good because from the side of the tenant, I don't have to present all of this paperwork. I can just approve the request of information, and from the side of property manager, they just have to say like they just want to know yes or no this person applies, and that's what they'll get. And it's also about my privacy. I don't want everyone knowing my whole identity. So that one, the real estate one, I think it's a very interesting one. And then uh, let's see, then you have one, Palau ID. Palau
Oh yeah,
ID is a
Palau.
yeah.
We
They
we were
have
one of the
a
first people to interview them. Jay Anson from Palau. We were one of the first people uh, to talk about the e-resident.
well, that's great. Well, they have a decentralized identity system now, and so when they issue that residential permit, it's a decentralized identity. So I think that one was very interesting.
It's RNS is the group or something.
Yeah, exactly.
RNS.id.
Yeah, that one exactly. And so we have them in the map, and that was an interesting one for me because you're already using the technology and with residential permits. And another one interesting in New Zealand is I'm not sure now if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's a how. And what they do is like they're an indigenous group in New Zealand, and they're using decentralized identity to keep track of their heritage, basically. So
Mm.
they're keeping track of their stories of any anything that they want to provide a history of their family, about how their customs, their traditions, etc. They're keeping it with verifiable credentials or decentralized identity, and they own that data. It's temporary system, which means that their history and their stories is gonna remain as it is, instead of the telephone game. You tell me this at the end of the game. You tell me something completely different. So I think those are great initiatives. You have, like I said, real estate already working on it to provide more efficiency. You have Allow ID providing, a safer way in which you can get your residential ID, and
Hmm.
you also have this community that is just in general making sure that um, they're keeping their story safe. And there's also um, uh, Jidinji. Jidinji, yeah,
Okay.
it's in Oceania. I don't remember exactly what country, but this is kind of like they are trying to make their own autonomous community. It's Australia actually, and the thing is, Australia is not recognizing yet those autonomous communities of indigenous people. And so this person said, you know what, we're gonna we're gonna just stop using the Australian passport ID or driver's license. Rather, we're gonna create our own, and they're using decentralized identity for that. And now they have created their own driver's license. And what would happen is that they would be stopped in the street and be like, "Hey, where's your driver's license?" And they'll be like, "Here it is." But it's a Jitinji, that autonomous community's driver's license, rather than the Australian.
Mm.
Um, and so it is conflicting in the sense of, okay, the government is also in persecution of not using the proper documentation for them, but it also gives them, these autonomous regions, their own way of identification in which they own them. So even if the Australian government is like, no, you can't do that, and I want to burn that driver's license, they can't do that. It's yours to keep, and if the community is using it, then you can use it. Right. And so I think that's the interesting things of decentralized identity, is that if you want to use it for your own events, for your community, for your university, then you're free to do so, and it's not like anyone can revoke it from you. And so I think those are the interesting cases that I've encountered. A lot more of use cases, but so far I think in general, just them wanting to have power over their identity, and them wanting to create their own community with their own identities is something inspiring at the end of the day. Making sure that they keep their history safe as well is something interesting. Yeah.
The future is going to be crazy. You got your identity decentrally linked to your healthcare decentrally linked to your real estate holdings. You're going to get a notification. They're going to be like, "Hey, man, you're very sick. You're going to die. Here's some tips for inheritance tax for your properties." I don't know. It's going to be all like interconnected.
It's gonna be very interesting. I think that it just you being able to hold your documentation in general is just gonna be um, it's gonna be better. I don't want to
Yeah,
be trusting that people are keeping my data safe and that they're keeping it
I totally
properly
get it.
documented.
Some of these things, like government documents, even just the non, because I feel like identity documents are one that it's a very touchy subject, obviously. But if government started maybe with blockchain, decentralized stuff, with just other government paperwork that needs to get done, like maybe if they could do the criminal background checks and the birth certificates or something, because we deal a lot with that. Like you gotta, if you want to get a residency visa somewhere, you have to get a criminal background check from your home country, and it's quite complicated. It can take multiple months. Um, the apostille system is very old school, and that's sort of it's not identity, but it's like confirming the uniqueness or the authenticity of a document, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what decentralized identity wants. Basically, that these processes can just be do more can be done efficiently and in a verifiable way. And so again, even with those criminal records, you can be issued that, and it's going to be, you know, quicker. You just have to send the government the request, like, "Hey, I want my credentials." Be like, "Here you go. I'll get them instantly. I wouldn't have to wait months for it." Um,
Exactly.
in general, let's just make things more efficient. I truly believe that. I'll be very excited to see that already being implemented in Honduras. Um, I think there's a lot of value in that, and I'm very excited to see. Actually, I was at an event recently, and it's very simple. It's not a very complicated process. It's basically just showing a QR code on your phone. Sometimes I was at an event recently, and
Hmm.
they sent us a verifiable credential to our email.
Hmm.
They said, "Hey, this is your pass for the event. Download it to your wallet, and this is what you'll use to get in." Exactly what I did. I downloaded it to my wallet and went to the event, scanned the QR code, verified it was me. They gave me my badge and my bag, and off you go. So it's as easy as that. You just sometimes you just have to scan a QR code. It's not that much of a hassle. And the other, I think I was also using authentication. And so, for example, I was also signing in for an eSIM in uh, in Switzerland, and they were actually using a decentralized identity product in which you also still have biometrics things, so to prove that you are who you are. So I think I did have to upload a picture of my passport, possibly.
Hmm.
Provide biometric authentication. And once that was done, I was issued a verifiable credential saying, yeah, this person is Nisa. This person has already proved that they exist with biometric features. And I can save that on my wallet. And so further on, if I were to sign up to another website that tells me, hey, you have to prove that you are who you are, we're going to request a verifiable credential about this, I can just show that credential that this system already provided. I kind of, instead of going through a KYC process every single time, you already have a credential that you can use that proves that you are already who you are. So I've seen it used in two occasions, which has been truly exciting considering it's been over 2 years studying this topic. It was like, okay, but who actually is using this? I mean, with the research, you see all of this marketing and all of this technology information and stuff like that. Uh, but actually seeing it work in real life, that was the most exciting thing. Seeing like, okay, actually people are using. So it's in simple things like that. It's not as complicated or it's not a very technical process. You can just show QR code or just tap a yes in your phone sometimes. But it's
Sure.
very interesting.
I can't believe how many organizations are working on something, and how many, um, like when I look at the list, a lot of municipalities, which is kind of
Hmm.
interesting. Um, but a really cool map overall. And I assume you're adding new organizations to it all the time.
Yeah, so we had we had to stop at some point. We stopped doing active research for the projects on July 2023. That's like the date where we stopped including the projects. Like if you announced after 2023, you're probably not in the map. But we're very open to now adding new projects. So if you come across a decentralized identity project, or if anyone comes across a project that they think should be included in the map, we're always open now to get these and add them. So you can see in the Web of Trust map um, that you have also, you can submit new projects.
Mhm.
You can set feedback if you think that the UX and UI can be better. Then you can also tell us, hey, this sucks. Come on, please, make this more efficient or something like that. Um, and um, you also get a lot of voice on editing. So
Mm.
it's you can suggest changes. So for example, if you're looking at a profile of a website and you say, no, actually this project was announced in 2019. It was not announced in 2020. Then you can suggest that change as well. So the map is very open for being collaborative or to receive a lot of feedback. So again, if anyone is wanting to provide feedback, they'll have a super easy way to do that and just be able to also verify the details with us. This whole research was done manually. We were about 15 researchers working most of the time, full day. um, and so you have people collecting this data and you have people verifying this data. Uh, but ideally we still want to rely on feedback, and that the organizations themselves are providing the details. All in all, what we find on the web is one thing, and then the organizations or companies might know more than we know, right? Because they know it firsthand and they might want to provide different documents. But yeah, so the map, we're open to receiving feedback, open to receiving new projects, and that's truly welcome.
That's awesome. Well, the website is weboftrust.org. Nisa, do you want to take this time and let people know where they can find you, where they can learn more about the Web of
Yeah.
Trust as well?
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, the you have the website where you'll find all of the data. We have a Twitter account, Web of Trust Map, and you can also follow Key State Capital on LinkedIn and on Twitter. You can find them with the same exact name, so Web of Trust Map or Key State Capital. Key State Capital is also posting about the map, and they're the developers, so you'll see a lot of updates there about decentralized identity.
Hmm.
And yeah, you can keep posted about the new findings of the map. We try to keep um, posting insights, analysis of what we found. For example, figuring out which blockchain is the one being used the most, or the different use cases, or if a new project is being added. We're also going to be posting that on Twitter. Um, and then from my side, you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Nisa Gonzalez, and you can also find me on Twitter, Nisa Gonzalez. It's very simple. I keep my names out there on both platforms. Mostly posting as well on interesting insights about the map and also some news worldwide about digital identity. So you can, if you're curious to follow up in digital identity in general, you can also just follow me there. But yeah, those
Awesome.
those are the places.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for doing this, Nisa. Weboftrust.org. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Again, our guest today, Nisa Gonzalez. There'll be a link in the description where you can find the website or the Twitter, and go down the rabbit hole of decentralized identity. And
Thank you
for the
so much.
audience, yeah, thanks for coming on. And for the audience, please subscribe to the podcast. We put out 2 episodes a week with amazing guests like Nisa. You won't want to miss an episode. You'd also want to check out our back catalog of episodes on Ciudad Morazan, Prospera, Palau, Zeddies and special economic zones, micronations. We've done a lot of episodes with people in this space. I think it's really, really interesting and evolving fast. And we'll catch you in the next episode. Ciao for now.